Whether it's the end of a dusty summer or the end of a wet winter, whatever it is, an end of season service will really help look after your bike and your wallet. So today I'm going to be talking about things that will make your bike last longer and save you money in the long run. Give your pedals some love, because if the parts inside of these pedals start to wear out, well, they won't spin very nice, they'll be hard to pedal, but they'll also start wearing out more expensive parts, and you don't want that. Eventually you might have to replace the whole pedal, which will cost you a lot more than just servicing the parts inside. So what we're looking for is wobbly spindles, any knocking, creaking, or if the pedal isn't moving too well at all, then chances are something needs servicing in this pedal. Now, most pedals will be able to be dismantled, and you might be able to grease up the bearings inside or replace the bearings. Sometimes when you get that wobble, it's just because the bearings have worn out or the bushings have worn out. But you can get service kits and replacement kits for a lot of brands too. Crank Brothers do a service kit, so you can actually rebuild them for less than it costs to buy a new set of pedals. We have actually done videos on this in the past, so I'll leave a link in the description below if you want to find out how to service your pedals. Suspension is a crucial part to your mountain bike, especially if it's full sus. But if your suspension isn't working well, then your whole bike isn't feeling good. And it's a very expensive part of your bike if it goes wrong. Usually you will be doing a lower leg service or an oil change on your air can about every 50 hours, and that's often about every 6 months. And why that is because the oil in the lowers tends to degrade, and if any water or dirt gets in there, it will mix with the oil, and that could be dragged around inside your fork, which could damage the insides. So you do want to stay on top of it. It's hard to know when things are going wrong without taking them apart. Now, I have done a video on GMBN Tech on how to service lowers, and it's a really simple job, and the video is only 5 minutes long. I'll leave the link in the description below for you to watch and see if it's something that you want to do. Otherwise, head to your service center and do get them checked out regularly. In the meantime, what you want to be doing is not using pressurized water around any of your seals. So that includes your dropper as well, because you don't want water getting in there and mixing with your oil. You also don't want to be leaving dirt around your seals. Make sure you clean that off. And you can get some stanchion lubricant or spray or oil that you can put on the stanchions to keep it feeling nice and buttery smooth. But I do recommend that lower leg service, as you can check all the seals and clean them up. If you have a full suspension bike, then chances are you will have bearings in the linkages. Now, some are easier to access than others depending on the model that you have, but often you can take it apart and grease them and keep them moving so they're nice and smooth, and so is your suspension. The problem is if you don't look after them or if you don't replace them when they start to seize up, then they can walk. And what that means is if you imagine the ball bearings inside the bearings now seize, then it could cause the outer casing of the bearing to move around in the frame, and that will eventually wear grooves and holes in your frame itself. Now, even if your manufacturer offers lifetime warranty on your bearings, they won't lifetime warranty your frame if you let it go too far and damage the frame as a result. So that will be an expensive cost. You could have a new swing arm or a whole new frame to replace that for the sake of just keeping on top of something that might cost you about £20 for a set of bearings. In order to check whether your bearings are still working, you can put your bike in a stand like this, remove the wheel and remove the shock, and that way you can move the swing arm freely and get an idea for how well it's moving. So you want to be looking out for any resistance or any notchy feelings, and if you feel that, then chances are something needs servicing or replacing. Now, even if you have a hardtail, chances are there's still some bearings in your frame. You'll have bearings in your headset and in your bottom bracket. And these are moving parts that you want to keep an eye on too. They will also need servicing and repairing so they don't cause any more damage by seizing up or being poorly maintained, especially with the bottom bracket. If that gets seized up, then not only is it tough to pedal, but you can actually get your crank seized into the bottom bracket, and that is a costly, expensive thing that might require a bit of damage to your cranks or even your frame to get back out. So it's just better if we keep on top of those little things. This one's an absolute classic, and yet I still see people not doing this, and that's keeping on top of your chain maintenance. So what I mean by this is your chain will wear over time. There will be pins inside of the plates which wear grooves in the chain, and as they settle into those grooves, they expand in chain length, and that's what we refer to as chain stretch. So as the chain stretches, it no longer meshes with the cassette or the teeth on your chainring, or the jockey wheels for that matter. And when it's all out of line, it will start to wear out those components. If you let it go too far and these wear out, well, they'll cost a lot more than the price of a chain. So Shimano XT, for example, a chain replacement will be between 20 and 30 pounds usually, and the whole drivetrain, which will need replacing if it wears out, will be about 450 pounds. So it is beneficial to stay on top of it. And the way to do that is to use a chain checker. Now, for 12 speed, you want to be replacing your chain by the time it gets to 0.5%. That's 0.5% stretch. Ideally before it gets to 0.5, depending on your wallet. If it's gone past that, chances are it's already started to wear out your drivetrain, and so you might as well keep it on there until the whole thing stops working and replace it. Now also, it should go without saying that you need to keep your chain clean and lubed, because that will increase the life of your chain and it will reduce the amount of time that you need to replace it. The reason it does this is because if we keep it cleaned, then that keeps the dirt off the chain and it stops creating that grinding paste that may prematurely wear out your chain. And also keeping it lubed means it's not dry and there won't be as much friction, and that will also increase the life. Learn how to fine-tune your brakes, because sometimes the calipers can get knocked out of line, and that means that you might start wearing out one side of the pad more than the other, and that means you'll prematurely have to go out and buy some new pads. So it's a simple task by loosening up the bolts and realigning things, but do keep an eye on them, because sometimes we get uneven wear because the pistons have got sticky. So the pistons inside the calipers, sometimes as they come out, they can collect dirt and dust, and sometimes collect braking dust from our pads being used, and they can get a bit sticky and you'll get uneven wear, and the performance of your brakes won't be great either. So it's usually a good idea to give them a clean and a service at least once a year, and it's a really simple task, and I've done a video on this recently, so check that out for a piston servicing video. And why not check out some of our brake bleeding videos as well to keep on top of the fluid in the system. Now, over time, you may get tiny little bubbles inside the fluid in our hoses, and that means that we'll get spongy and poor performance, weak brakes, which is pretty undesirable but can be unsafe too. And even if you don't get a build-up of air in the system, generally that fluid starts to degrade over time anyway and will need replacing anyway. So do check out those videos and keep on top of your brakes. There's a few things on your wheels that you want to keep on top of to make sure they stay rolling. One of those things is tire pressure. Now, tire pressure will change over time. It can go down, and if you accidentally go out with pressures that are too low for you, then you might end up bottoming out the tire and hitting the rim. So you could damage your rims or dent the rims, and that would be a costly replacement when all you needed to do was keep on top of tire pressure. Keep on top of your sealant as well. Now, sealant, depending on the brand and depending on what they use for their recipe of sealant, they will have different lifespans. Now, some will obviously come out as you get punctures, if you get punctures, but a lot of sealant will degrade over time as well, or it may dry out if you live in a hot country. And so these things do need replacing and refreshing over time. So check out the specs on the back of your sealants and see how often it is you need to replace them. Also, check out the tension on your spokes on a regular basis. If you've had a hard ride or a hard holiday on your bike, then check the tension of your spokes manually. And although this isn't an exact science, you do get a feel for whether anything is not equal in tension. And if there's anything loose, then make sure you get to a bike shop or an expert to fix it for you before it gets worse. So if you were to get a loose spoke, for example, that could let your rim start to come out of whack or out of true, which means it will be wobbly, but also it can then start to put uneven tension on the rest of the spokes, and the thing might unravel like an old jumper. So you do want to keep on top of these, and if you don't know what you're doing when it comes to retensioning spokes, then just take it to a bike shop and get it fixed and get it fully tensioned all the way around, because once you've got a strong wheel with all even tension, it should last a lot longer. Well, there you go. There's a few things to keep on top of to make your bike last longer, and hopefully it will save you money in the long run because you won't have to replace something more expensive. But if I've missed anything and you're a regular viewer, then let us know down in the comments below your handy tips so that you can help out the GMBN community in the future.